Hey, welcome to Smoker Broker. I'm Robert Mesh, and I am the guy they call the Smoker Broker. Happy Thursday. Hope everything's going well. We continue to move on in the world of COVID, the new, whatever you want to call it. But day by day, everything's different. Something's new. One thing I do want to start the show off with today, because I found it very relevant to a show we did at the beginning of COVID. Massive article released by Forbes, I believe, this morning, or Fortune 500, one of the big ones out there, and it talked about how the housing industry right now is booming, and it's like a 20% increase over the year before. And it's talking about how the article really focused in on how people are spending money, especially on homes, cars, and other luxury items. And this is kind of an interesting situation that I talked about earlier in March, where we didn't know what COVID was going to do. We still don't know what COVID is going to do. But one of the things that I suggested was that there is a possible euphoric end to COVID for a lot of people. Now, I want to be very careful and very sympathetic on how I say euphoric. There's nothing euphoric about COVID. COVID is awful. It's killed 40,000 people right now. Globally, so many people have had it, and it's going to continue to do that. There's nothing that's euphoric about COVID killing people and scaring people like it does right now. But there is something that COVID has done, and it's been an interesting phenomenon. And I did predict it months ago, where I suggested that if people feel that they can get past COVID, like no matter what happens, that we move on, we continue to press on like we always do, that people might develop this momentum behind them that suggests that, look, if I can get past COVID, I can do anything. And I'm not going to waste my life anymore. I'm going to start making myself happy now. And you're seeing this phenomenon, especially in the people who are like in their mid 40s to early 60s or so. They're starting to say, like, I only have so much time. I'm going to stop waiting until I'm 55 or 60 to do things. I'm going to buy the house that I want. I'm going to change the house the way I want it. I'm going to go buy a car. I'm going to start living the life the way I want to live it. Somewhat of a euphoria that's created because of the horribleness. COVID is an interesting animal in itself. That COVID is we've had many national moments of concern over the last 30 or 40 years. You talk about terrorist attacks. There's numerous things that we can go back and say. SARS. We've had national emergencies that have concerned us, but COVID is the first time that actually limited our freedom, where it limited us, forced us to stay home, which we've never been told to do in modern history. And I think it's had the reaction to some people like, that's about as bad as it can be outside of dying, is being told you can't go anywhere, you can't do anything. And I really believe this is a bent up frustration that a lot of people have said, you know what, I'm not going to let this control me. I'm going to get out there. I am going to utilize the safety and be smart about what I'm doing. I think all of us are getting to the opinion, no matter whether we hate the mask or not, I think all of us are getting closer to the opinion that we have to have them on. That's just there are people that are acknowledging that it is pushing this virus back, but we're still expanding and moving on with life. And some people are starting to take joy in that, especially those who've had COVID and said, hey, look, I've had it, and there's not proof yet that you can get it again. And so those people, too, are starting to feel a little bit stronger, along with the people that are like, if I get it, I get it. So there is some type of euphoria. And I love the article today because that's exactly what it talked about. It actually acknowledged that the general public is having a more positive flow than anticipated over certain things. We still know that unemployment is out there. We still know that COVID has more waves. We still are fearful of the kids going back to school, which is obviously a hot agenda right now. Do they go back or do they not? We clearly have obstacles in place, but there is something that continues to drive us that's making it like, life is moving on. I am going to enjoy it. And that's exactly what that article today was talking about. So I love it when there's something that I go out on a limb on and it's starting to be confirmed in massive, actually reliable news channels, not just fake news or something, things that we actually have seen ourselves. So I thought that was really interesting today. And I wanted to start the show off with that because it has relevance to what we discuss on this show. we have been talking about COVID in the intro of our shows since the beginning of March because we absolutely have to. We're not consumed by it, but we talk about it. But I really thought that was a great way to start the show off today because there's great interest in what it is that we're pushing and what we're actually living through right now. With that said, we are going to continue our conversation from last week about working with buyers. We had a huge response to people saying they like that show. We can never cover everything in a short hour time frame. And normally I don't put the same shows back and forth together because I like to really have variety on the show. But I did decide on this one. We're going to keep going. We had, I think the archives had anywhere from 550 to 600 people watch the show last week. And that shows me that a lot of people had interest in this particular topic. So we're going to go ahead and continue it today. As always, I bring some of my guys on. I can't do this by myself. In fact, I usually can't do it at all if I don't have them. They offer a lot more expertise than I do because a lot of times they're in the field seeing this day to day. And I am in the field as well, but not near as much as them. I got my buddy Brent Holdburg out here. He does almost everything for me. He is a staple co-host on the show. But one thing I'm doing different today, I've been telling myself that I really need to bring some of my other agents on that aren't normal co-hosts because I want them to have the exposure of dealing with the general public. You know, the show does go from coast to coast. It is live without limits on KBGI media. So a lot of people that watch from different places out there. And I like to give my guys more exposure. So this is something I'm going to start doing on the show more often is bringing some of my guys on that aren't major co-hosts so they can get some exposure to it and interact with us. So that's my buddy over there, Jessi Aguilar. He's on the show today, and he's going to give us a little bit of input here and there. He's not used to talking in front of a lot of people, so we're going to make it a lot easier on him just so he can acknowledge some of the things we're talking about. So, Jessi, thanks for being on the show with us today. Brent, always super paranoid over there. He's like about 10 feet from me. He's got the mask on. He's worried that something's
I can't even drink my coffee. Like, how am
I? My favorite of the places that are banning are there that insist on masks, but then it's a drinking or a smoking. But I'm like, how do you do that? Do you cut a hole?
Well, when you're drinking, it's not contagious anymore.
Right.
And then you put the cup down, then it's contagious again.
Yeah, the hypocrisies are tough on what it is that we're doing. I think we all agree that the mask should be worn in public, but it is becoming difficult as to how far do we go with, is the mask going to stop, from certain situations? So that is always kind of a interesting conversation right now. But Brent being ultra paranoid, but actually doing a good promo there that we should have the mask on. We do insist that our agents, when they're out and about, they do abide by the governor's response that we do have masks on in public.
Where's our Smoker Broker branded masks? Come on.
Smoker Broker, we need to have it. I have it everywhere else. We might as well have it on mask. That's something I have not done yet. Most people are probably surprised by that, but probably need to do that just the same. All right, so we're going to get back into talking about working with a buyer. We kind of left off where we were discussing things like what their down payment's going to be. You know, have we looked at the MLS? What are the comps saying? You know, have we prepared them for what they're going to need? So now we're going to actually get into prepping them for what we need for the offer. Now, again, this particular show is different than our contract show because on our contract show, we actually go in and say, you need to fill it out just like this. This is why you're doing it. But now we're actually talking about prepping the offer. So we actually have to ask, people what it is that they need. So Jessi, we actually have a checklist, right? When you go through, we have a buyer checklist in place that says, these are the things that we look at, right?
Every single time.
Yeah, that's right. So we do. We have that out there. Jessi's very good. As many agents are really following directions and looking at what he needs to do. Jessi, one of the things I didn't introduce about Jessi as well, he's very unique in the fact he actually holds some of the records inside of our team for probably being not only the youngest, but having the highest volume first deal ever. So he's always an interesting guy to talk to, but he's very good about following directions. It's not like I see Jessi every 5 minutes, but he's very good at following the checklist that we have in place. And that's actually what we're talking about today, are those checklists so that people like him do not make mistakes. And if it's been a long time since they've done one, they can easily remember what it is that they're supposed to do. So one of the first things we start discussing with our clients once we're in the offer phase. So we're all past pre-approvals. We're all past that. We've started talking to them about what their requirements are. Now we're all past that. We've actually shown them houses. Now we're at the point where we're going to say, we're ready to put an offer on this house. What do we do? So when it comes to the loan side, there are really three alternatives for third-party financing. You're looking at doing a conventional loan, and then you have the government-backed loans, whether you do an FHA loan or whether you do a veterans loan. Okay, so those are the three. Yes, there's owner financing, contract for deeds, but we really are focusing on the primary modes of financing. So, Brent, tell them a little bit, why is there a big difference as to someone, whether they're doing FHA, conventional, or VA? What are some of the things that we want to talk to our clients about if they're going certain ways and how that could affect their offers?
Yeah. So, I mean, the biggest reason that you would do some of the government-backed loans is the down payment amount, right? VA, they can get into it with 0 down. FHA, as little as 3.5% down. But, and we'll get into it more, but the government-backed loans can be trickier because there's going to be more underwriting requirements. There's going to be, more things on the appraisal that can cause problems. So, they could be good either way, but there can also cause some problems down the road.
Jessi, do you think that the FHA or VA appraiser is sometimes more stringent than just a normal appraisal? Do you think they're a little bit tougher?
Yes, I just because because it is a government backed loan, and they're more watching out for their back because they understand, like, hey, this is money that is guaranteed, so we have to be sure that this is going to the right place.
That is a very good response. I mean, that actually is a very good response because that is what happens. So we have a lot of appraiser friends that watch the show, and any appraiser will tell you in front of everybody else that every appraisal is the same. They will. But they will tell you, if you're private with them, they will damn well tell you that they are more conservative when they are on those government-backed loans because they are tracked as to how many of those loans fail. So they'll tell you everyone's the same, but believe me, they realize that the government-backed loans have a lot more scrutiny over them. So they are watching very carefully. So that's a very good response. So
for good reason, though, because, I mean, our government never wastes any money. So I want to make sure that they.
Well, why now? Why are they all of a sudden deciding to focus on this? Yeah. So they're very careful about the loan itself. So some things we're going to tell a buyer when we start off, we're going to suggest to them, look, first of all, there's nothing wrong with a VA, FHA versus conventional. We're going to talk about subtle differences, but in the end, almost any agent is going to take any of these loans. You just have to know some of the intricacies that these things have that could possibly cause a perception problem. And I'm going to say perception because that's what it falls down to. It becomes, is it a perception problem versus is there something wrong with this loan? So it's funny, a lot of people, the FHA loan was originally created to be a first-time home buyer loan. In fact, when you talk to anybody who is traditional in real estate, and that's a very polite way of saying someone who's been in it for a long time, a lot of your parents might acknowledge, oh, I don't want to go FHA. I have to pay all these expenses. That is the old FHA. We don't really pay hardly anything on an FHA loan anymore. So that's a real past tense type of thing, and it's terribly misunderstood with the general public. So a lot of times you'll have people react to, oh, I don't want to go FHA. The real intelligent response to someone who does object to an FHA is when they say something along the lines of, hey, I heard those appraisals are a little bit more tense, which the general public doesn't know. So they really don't have a real good opinion as to why someone's going FHA. Some people would argue, since the FHA is as low as 3.5% down, that the person struggling for money, that's why they're doing that. You could look at it that way. Here's another way you could look at it. Interest rates are at historic lows. It's almost as if they're giving free money out. Why would I put $200K of my money into a loan when I can go take that elsewhere and invest it and make 10 to 15% when I'm only being charged 2%? I might be willing to go FHA as well if that was the case. So don't make the assumption because it's a low down payment that the person has financial issues. They could argue the opposite, that they're very wealthy, but they're very intelligent with how the finance process works, and that's why they're going FHA. So don't make an assumption when you're going through the offer that the FHA is going to hurt. Yeah, straight up, if my client can do FHA, conventional versus FHA, and there's really no difference to them, and they have the extra 1.5%, which is the low part of the conventional is typically 5%. Yeah, I would tell them they probably should go conventional. But is it something I'm going to stop the whole process over? No. There are just some things that probably, if there's choices, yeah, I'd rather go conventional. But in the end, if that's the loan that they have to take, no problem. The VA has the opposite effect. The VA note, it has the same issues with concerns about a real strict appraisal, but there are a lot of people out there that very much respect the VA loan. There are a lot of people, when they hear it's a vet on the other side, they want to do well with them. So I would say that it almost actually is supportive when someone throws a VA note out there. So different intricacies in there, but in the end, it doesn't matter. We just want them to know how it could be perceived. This is a perception thing that we're looking at when we're drafting this offer. So the other thing we got to look at is when we're going FHA. Brent, what are some concerns that an FHA loan might have besides being stringent? What are some things specifically that an FHA appraiser might say, I don't know about that?
Foundation, roof, they get really weird about that.
Mm-hmm.
Anything that's going to be a big deal, that they're not going to be near as flexible as it would be. Well, I mean, appraiser doesn't actually care on a conventional if the foundation sucks. Really, they don't mention it. Right?
Do you know of any of the simplistic things that they pick on that you wouldn't think are a problem, but actually could be? Off the top of your head, it's okay if you don't.
Not off the top of my head, but I'm sure.
Cool, because I have stupid ones. I have dumb ones that I've seen over the years that have surprised me. Like one time, we had there's a shed in the back of the house. It's a huge house, just like a third of an acre. Beautiful house, $400K. There's a shed on the far back of the property. It's a POS shed. The VA appraiser came back and said, "Hey, one of those windows are cracked." Like, where? They go in the shed. I go, the shed? I go, that has a bunch of tools. It's not even close to the house. They go, yeah, but the way we do it, it has to be included. I was like, wow. I've seen one time where there was a penetration in the roof where there was a hole that had just a little bit of sunlight going through. FHA appraiser came in and said, obviously that's leaking. That needs to be repaired. We can't let a government-backed loan go in with potential mold issues. So there are some tiny things in there that can really confuse us and actually hurt our offer process. So when you're going through the offers, this is a longer conversation when we're in contracts, but the general rule of thumb here is if you can go conventional, great. I mean, there's nothing wrong with the FHA or VA. We'd rather go conventional. Of course, we'd rather go cash if we could, but just be weary that if you're up against somebody who's paying cash or going conventional, you might be behind the eight ball just a little bit on those loans. Your buyer deserves to know that when you're drafting this offer for them. Okay, a lot of times we're going to look at too whether a HOA exists. Okay, Jessi, would you say that it's 50-50? There's no right answer here. Would you say that, in your opinion, a lot of people want an HOA or a lot of people hate an HOA?
Ooh, yeah, that more varies to the person. So for me, being the country boy that I am, so I personally don't like HOAs.
Yeah, so that's a good way to say it. It is you will find someone who's more rural based. I don't want anybody telling me what to do. And my experience over the years has been that it is 50-50. You have some people that love the HOA because it keeps everybody in line. They can't trash the place out. But then the other people, like, I don't like being told what to do. So when you're drafting offers, you have to make sure you understand, is an HOA involved? If there is an HOA involved, make sure your buyer is aware of it and they know what the HOA entails. Most buyers already know, but you should at least tell them. But what it's also triggering to us as we're preparing this offer, that's another addendum that we're going to have in place. Okay. This is what we call the mandatory membership for home association. That's the long fill term for it's an HOA doc that has to be completed. So that's another thing as you're going through and you're taking notes and you're taking takeaways from the actual show. If you see and know that there's an HOA involved, you're going to have an addendum placed up and your buyer needs to be prepared for that. I think we talked a little bit about this the last time, but and we've merged this on other shows, but since we're in the process and we want to keep the flow, let's start talking about earnest money. So Brent, give them an opinionated version of what we can do and what we look at when we're looking at earnest money and go through the price levels of how that changes.
Yeah, so I'll get to that. I just wanted to also bring up real quick with the FHA, VA, and conventional. With FHA and VA, there are loan limits. So that's something that you do have to be aware of when you're making that offer. right? So when it comes to earnest money, I mean, we used to just do for, say, a $200,000 house, we put like $1,000 down or something like that. I just pretty much in general just go for a straight 1% across the board.
So that's
I just tell them that from the
that's the traditional way. That's how we were trained years ago to do it, and that art has been lost and replaced. And kind of talk about the matrices that you see across the board. I like the fact that you use 1%. I personally, in my opinion, it should be 1%, but that's not how it always works, does it?
No, I mean, I'm seeing it a lot more though lately. I mean, I'm seeing most contracts coming in with close to 1%. It depends on, obviously price point. Some people, like, if it's a $200,000 house, they put $1,000 down. If it's a 300, they put maybe $2,000 down. But just in general, like you said, okay, so I guess it's old school, but it just does work better. It's a nice, consistent way to let your buyers know at the very beginning, hey, no matter what you offer, you're going to put down 1% earnest money.
Yeah, consistency is a good word to use in that type of situation. Talk about how the earnest money might affect the offer that you're putting in.
Yeah, so basically the sellers, when they're looking at your offer and they're reviewing it, they want to see that you've got some sort of skin in the game. And if you bail out for any reason, if you have a lot of earnest money in there after the option period, then they know that they're at least going to be compensated for, the pain of having their deal fall through. If you come in on a $500,000 house with only $1,000 down, I mean, the odds of that buyer backing out are quite a bit higher if they're going to lose $1,000 as opposed to $5,000.
Well, and this kind of coincides with an entire show in itself, where we talk about the consequences of earnest money. And I always throw it in, even if we're talking about something separate. But a lot of agents, this is a good takeaway from the show too. A lot of agents make the mistake that they think backing out, the only consequence is losing the earnest money. That's step one. All right. Now, we're not going to get into the other steps because that's too long for this show. But rest assured, especially anybody who's new that's watching this show, don't ever tell your buyer if they back out, the only thing they're going to lose is their earnest money. It is very possible that they might have monetary damages associated as well as to what that seller has already done in anticipation that buyer is going to close. So earnest money does give us an idea as to, well, that's one good faith estimate out there that they're going to lose that if they pull this stunt. So we want to make sure that they're persuaded to not do something like that, which is why sometimes we will ask for a decent amount of earnest money. Earnest money is a goodwill gesture saying that this person is serious about purchasing this home. If you're one of the agents that are out there that are about to take the test, from an academic side, a lot of veteran agents don't know this either. Earnest money is actually not required on a contract. Legally, you don't have to have earnest money. Good luck getting your contract, your offer taken without it. But legally, it doesn't have to be there. That's something from an academic standpoint that a lot of people don't know. So yes, earnest money can have an effect. Jessi, when you did your mega deal a while ago, we weren't offering, $1,000 of earnest money, were we? It was more expensive than what we put down, wasn't it?
Oh yeah. I think we put down close. Something. Yeah, so this was 1%. Yeah, so we put 7,500.
Yeah, and that's a significant amount of earnest money on a property, and if the deal is in jeopardy, that's something that we have to be concerned about. That's floating out there. That we could potentially lose quite a bit of money. So that's good. That's a very good short conversation. What, Brent?
It's relative too, because I'm not going to say his name, but one of our top agents. Remember, he had that giant deal fall through, and the buyer was like, "Oh, it's only how much earnest money did you lose?"
Oh yeah, right. So that's a great comment. So we do deal with some wealthy clients out there, and that did happen. We did have one where it was 30 grand, and his response was, "Oh God," because I thought we were talking about $1 million. No problem. My good Lord. So I guess it is relative,
right,
as to who we're talking about. But that's why the checks and balances are in place. That's the back end of this. The back end of this is, well, yeah, that's the start, but now I'm going to hit you for another $500K because I packed my stuff up. So it is a good checks and balance system in place. It's just a shame how few of the agents understand the consequences for backing out. So that's good. That's a really good, short, concise conversation on earnest money. because it is important when you're in the offer process and you're working with the buyer. You should have some understanding as to why you're just putting that earnest money down. Hopefully you also see the benefit of our show. When you're trained how to do this, you're literally told to put a number in place there. They never rarely go through all the alternatives as to why you're doing that. We're giving you the why. We're telling you why you should put a certain amount of earnest money down and what those consequences are. So we're always taking it to the next level on this show. Our key component is educating the general public and up and coming and existing agents on what is the right thing to do. And this is a conversation that's so annoying. So when we're going through the offer, we start prepping, and there is a decision that has to be made as to which title company that we're going to go through. Title company rarely affects us as real estate agents. The title company industry is heavily regulated. They really can't do much than the other as far as perks or anything. All they can really do is who has better service. So from our standpoint, it really doesn't matter as much. We just want to go typically with someone who's comfortable. But the real silly part about this conversation, Brent, who really should be choosing the title company? And it's not a real estate agent. Who really should choose the title company?
Should be. I mean, in the MLS, it's up to the seller's choice to put
it says seller's choice.
Policy.
But is that what happens? Do we typically ask the seller what title company they want to go to?
I don't know if I ever have.
Yeah, we typically are the ones that select it, which causes a problem.
Well, but I mean, in general, because we're the ones interacting with them on a day-to-day basis. So if we have a title company that we know is going to make the transaction smooth, keep our buyers and sellers coordinated and up to date, then that's worth quite a bit. But it's nothing that we'd ever blow a deal up over if that's
good, because that's where I'm going with this, and I'm going to keep this one short and sweet because this one can go longer. But on this one, he just said the problem. This should have no impact on this deal at all. We should not be arguing. So if you want a good takeaway on this particular segment of the show, do not ever start getting in arguments or losing a deal over a title company. State your best argument as to why you want yours done. I will tell you the etiquette suggests that it's the seller agent, the listing agent, who should choose it because it's their seller who's paying for it. And it's expensive. It runs just about below 1% of the sales price. So etiquette should suggest if the seller is paying for it, then they should choose the title company. But outside of that, there shouldn't be any more conversation. This should be a quick part of the contract, and we move on. Those of you who are taught to defend putting a certain title company down or actually arguing about it, you are losing. You're losing the battle versus winning the war, because in the end, if I'm going to fight for something, it's going to be for a lower price or something else that's a more important turn to me. Which title I'm not going to lose my credibility up on a title company when I could be using it towards the sales price. So be careful where you argue. Sometimes when you start arguing everything, it's just like anything else in the real world. Anytime somebody starts chopping away, people usually get tired of that person chopping and they start ignoring them and they don't listen to them. And you do not want that when you're prepping an offer. So I like the way
what'd you say?
Failed out. What's that, Brent?
So what'd you say?
I said I like the I just caught what you're saying. Idiot. The brains of the operation today. I like his title. He goes by multiple ones. That is true, technically. There's some truth to that. Okay, let's see what else we got on there. We have so you got some simple things on there. You need to prep your buyer for the survey process. That we're going to want to see a survey. Most of the time, the seller has an existing survey in place, and we're going to review it. Most of the time, the survey is not as big of a deal to us unless we're planning to do something structural in the backside of the property. For instance, are we going to put a pool in, or are we going to put a patio in? Then the survey might cause us issues. This is certainly not the time and the place on this show to talk about surveys, but surveys are one of the few things that you're really not shown how to do in any type of class or any type of training at your broker. It's rare that we go over surveys. So one thing I always suggest to people that are coming up in the real estate community, and this is a really good takeaway for a lot of agents out there, you should talk to your title company or a preferred title company about how the survey works. They are actually the best at explaining how you can read a survey. So a lot of times the survey education doesn't come from your broker as much as it does from a title company. You should take a title company up on if they want to show you how to utilize a survey. That's something that you should look at.
You usually come across that at closing when the title rep is going over the survey, and you're standing there looking at it upside down, nodding your head like you know what you're looking at. You're like, oh.
Yeah, super embarrassing, because you should know what the survey, you should know that an X typically is not for like some treasure that's buried. An X typically stands for a fence post on a survey. You should know those certain types of things.
Oh, I didn't know there was an easement in the middle of the backyard. Oops.
Why are they giving me the treasure map? All right, Brent, kind of go ahead and you start gearing. You see the checklist that I'm going down there. Go ahead and take over with where we're at on how we do it with the warranty and what we're looking at with that.
Yeah, just a couple things too. We got to mention, just down payment amount really does matter to a seller. So you got to make sure that because believe it or not, even in COVID, we're still coming across multiple offer situations. Right, I'm seeing them every day, multiple times.
20% up right now. So
yeah. So down payment amount is important, right? If you're trying to win those bids, like we said, the survey. What were we going to talk about, Rob? Were we going to talk about like title policy, any of that stuff?
Warranty. Talk about the warranties when we purchase the warranty.
Right.
What is it we're looking at when we purchase the home warranty?
So first of all, how many new agents ask you, what's a residential service contract? I know I did.
That's good. That's a good way to say it, because a lot of even existing agents still don't understand we're talking about a home warranty, right?
I asked that question. So yeah, I mean, it's most listing agents prep their sellers. They're going to have to pay anywhere from $500 to $700 for a home warranty for the buyer for the first year, depending on the size of the house. If there's a pool, that number can go up a little bit, but $500 to $700. We usually say about $550, $600. COVID is going to. That's what you're going to want to ask that seller to pay for. So, and we know that and good agents will prep their buyers to tell them, hey, look, this is a home warranty. It does not cover everything. There's going to be a lot of times that something breaks and you could be disappointed in the lack of coverage, but it's basically free to you. So you might as well just take it.
Yeah. Jessi, does the home warranty cover a foundation issue?
Oh man, that's more of a bigger conversation to have, because man, that warranty for the foundation is just something else.
It's a whole different world, right? The foundation is looking at whether it had its own warranty in place, so it's actually a separate warranty that we're looking at, right? So Jessi's hinting at the fact that there's a separate warranty in the foundation. The home warranty itself will not protect the foundation. You're not going to have a home warranty company say, and they'd be out of business within the second. So, but Jessi brings up a good point. There are typically separate warranties in place for a foundation. So that's a good conversation in itself.
Yeah, typically the company that fix up the foundation, they will provide the warranty.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And we want to see that when we're prepping a buyer. That's something we want to have looked at before we actually continue to commit into this.
Well, and I've seen a home warranty not cover a buyer's heater that broke because they don't cover moving parts. You have to look very carefully in the fine print, right? So, and you can argue with it all you want, but it's ultimately up to them to say, no, we're not going to cover that.
Yeah, unfortunately, home warranties get a bad rep because of the way they handle their business. But in the end, all of them do the same thing. I mean, and home warranties were really created for the air conditioner, especially in Texas, since we have so many problems with them. Any home warranty company is going to tell you they will go out of their way before they replace the AC unit.
Yep.
They are going to try to band-aid any way to say, look, it's still working. Yep. So it is difficult. Some of the home warranty companies can be difficult to deal with, but in the end, their heart is in the right place. They do want to help. Every offer you do as a buyer should have a home warranty in place. They are very good for certain things. When the air conditioner does have a little problem, it's nice to have it. When the water heater goes out, it's nice to have it. There are a lot of things on that warranty that are protected, and the seller is typically going to pay for it. So, and it also creates a good buffer, from the listing side of it. If you ever have a seller, this is a good takeaway as well. If you ever have a seller who says, I don't want to pay for a home warranty, you're like, yeah, you do. Because that's the one thing that's going to keep that buyer from calling you back all the time saying, why isn't this working? Why isn't that working? That's where you fire away with, hey, I bought a warranty for you. You deal with it. I'm done with this conversation. So don't ever let a seller tell you that they don't want the home warranty. They want to buy the home warranty.
Well, and it never fails that your buyer's AC breaks the day they move in. Like,
the show gets watched across the country, but in Texas, that's a far greater problem.
Yeah.
It is. Those of you who think that an air condition, that's bad luck, that your air conditioner breaks the day before you close or the day after, it happens all the time.
Yep.
I don't think it's a Murphy's Law on you. It's Texas. And those things
run. Call from your buyer after you close.
Yeah, I mean, so that's why those things are in place. Certain companies are going to have warranties in place when you list. I will. This show's watched by a lot of brokerages, but I will toot Keller Williams' horn. A lot of branches, including the ones that we're at, they actually have home warranties in place that are automatic. That the moment we list your house, we actually already have a warranty in place that if something like that does happen, you're protected. It doesn't even cost you anything. So there are cool things about the home warranty. You want the home warranty. That when you're putting an offer, you want to ask for it.
Yeah, Robert.
Yep, go ahead.
So just speaking about the AC really quickly. So there's a lease that I did yesterday and everything, and the AC wasn't working. So we needed to just put in a window unit just for a day or two, and the AC got fixed today, and the home warranty said, hey, yeah, it just turned out to be a circuit board.
So that's great. So that's good. So what could have been a really bad situation actually wasn't that bad at all. Really smart thinking on the window unit there too. That's something I probably wouldn't have taken that route. So that's kind of interesting. You guys did that. So yeah, that's exactly what we're talking about. Great input on that. Sometimes we want that thing in place because it could save us bigger issues. All right, Brent, talk a little bit about
closing date.
Go ahead.
Closing date.
Yeah, talk about when we get.
I've ever seen your checklist, so I'm just going through it one by one.
Why am I having to talk? Why aren't you doing this? Talk about how. Because this is a stickier conversation. This isn't just about putting a closing date down. Talk about what we have to think about when we talk about average time, talk about extended times, and what can happen.
Right. So first thing you need to do, average time is 30 days. That's just usually a good rule of thumb. First thing you need to do is you always need to talk to the lender and say, can you get this done in 30 days? It's going to depend who the lender is. If they're a big conglomerate bank, I doubt you're going to get it done in 30 days, right? You might need 45. So you need to talk to the lender and see how quickly they can get it done. The other thing you need to do is you need to make sure that it's not too far out that seller is going to say, well, why are we going to stay, we're going to wait 60 days? You wouldn't want that. Then you need to look at what day you're going to close on. Okay, so most agents like to put Fridays down for some God knows reason. I don't know why. But Fridays are horrific for closing. One, titles are jammed because everybody does it. If you miss funding, then your buyer is not going to get to move in until Monday. And also, you need to look and see, is that closing date on a holiday? I hit the trifecta when I did a closing on, it was Good Friday, and I didn't realize that title company was closed.
Good Friday. Thanksgiving, the Wednesday before Thanksgiving is the absolute worst time to close on a home. If you miss that, you are literally talking about 5 or 6 days back into Monday. And then you're even lucky if they can get that. Don't ever close the Wednesday of Thanksgiving. I wouldn't even tell you to close the week of Thanksgiving, period. I would say you either do it before or you do it after. That's a horrible time to close on a house. Christmas too. When you start getting into Christmas Eve, and that New Year's stretch is a terrible time to make the actual schedule close down. Now, don't get me wrong. There are sometimes we just can't help it. Businesses, jobs require that we close. I'm not telling you don't close, period. I'm telling you, if you have the choice, make sure you don't put those dates on there. If you have to do it, you have to do it. You have to roll the dice sometimes. But, man, if you've got the choice and you put that is dumb. You're just asking for trouble. Brent, that's your cue to keep going.
All right. There has been pauses earlier. So, make sure that you are setting up your closing on a day that, like a Thursday. I like closes on Thursday. It's just a day. That way you have another day to bump it past, and then like I said, it's not on a holiday. It's not on the end of the week, and your lender can get it done in time. That's all I have to say about that.
All right, go into when we're drafting the option. What are we looking for when we're looking at the option period? What are some things that we're going to be prepared for as we're prepping this offer?
Right. So usually in the real estate world, we go through 2 options for the option period. And for those new agents, that option period is when you get your inspections done, you get your repair negotiations done during that time, and your buyer can get out of the contract for any reason during the option period, that option window. So the 2 options we usually go for is either 7 days or 10 days. That's pretty standard. I know most agents, listing agents prefer a 7. Most buyers agents prefer a 10. And either one of those can work. But if you're in a multiple offer situation, sometimes you might want to drop that option period down to 5 days. That can make the difference to get you that edge. But you better be on top of your buyers to schedule that inspection ASAP. I mean, that needs to be done the next day.
Yeah, you should never go beyond 10 days. Most agents will never let you do it anyways. And you really should, some agents will say for a 5 or 6 day, that's really almost too short. 7 to 10 days is the optimal time for an option period. That's what you should be granted. Anything below is not quick, is not long enough, and anything past is actually too long. So we're looking at a very small window in that option. Hey, before I forget, a little bit off subject here, but I always want to make sure I thank our sponsor. We have Martin Cooley out of BPD Inspections. He has been an outstanding sponsor for us. We have a lot of choices when it comes to home inspections, and we do offer all of our clients multiple choices because we don't want to just tell them go to one inspector. First of all, it's not very ethical, and 2, we want them to be the one that makes the choice. But I'd be lying to you if I didn't say, look, this guy's done a fabulous job for us for the last 10 to 15 years. We've never had any problems. The clients love him. He's got a great bedside manner when he's talking to him. He doesn't scare the hell out of them, but he tells them exactly what's wrong. His reports are very easy to read. And when you're a supervising broker or a supervising team lead, that is something that's very valuable for your time to be able to look at those things super quick. His number and his information is there at the bottom. You can reach him at 817-401-3240. Always very grateful to have him. He's a good friend. He's a very good business partner. We have a lot of real estate agents that watch, especially across the DFW area. Feel free to contact him. He's a very good inspector for us to have.
It's funny, I'm used to using Martin so much that when I see an inspection report that's not done by him, I was like, oh, where's the color coding?
So that's a great point to make. It's actually annoying to me because when I start going through it, now I've got to read 45 pages, whereas with his, I would have only had to have read 2 or 3. And when you're talking about someone who reviews all those documents, that's a huge time saver for me. Some of those inspections, God, the ones that go into 60 pages, you inspectors that are watching, what is wrong with you? Shorten that. That's absurd.
And you can miss things earlier. You can miss them too if they're not in that summary.
What's so much damn CYA? That's my only shot towards an inspector. The CYA is so absurd.
Mm-hmm.
You are told to put what the state tells you to put. You don't have to sit there and have all these. Well, if it were me, I get I do this or I do that. That's another thing I do appreciate. In Martin being a primary sponsor of the SWR group and for Keller Williams and our Keller Williams group out there. Okay, we're getting close to, we're at 45, so about 10, 15 more minutes. Let's talk about a few more things in here. The general public probably doesn't understand this as much, but we want to have a brief conversation. So when we're prepping this offer, we have to have a conversation with our buyer about intermediary practices. Okay, intermediary practices suggest that if it's our buyer and we take him to a seller, and so let's use Brent and Jessi as good examples. Let's say Jessi has they're both agents under me, so they're inside of our brokerage. They report to the same broker, but let's say Jessi represents one of our buyers and he takes his buyer to Brent's seller. Both of them are clients. They have to be clients for this to be an intermediary. That's what we call an intermediary with appointments. Okay. Means the broker, someone like me, is going to say, I appoint Brent to the seller and I appoint Jessi to the buyer. What's great about that is they can give all their advice and opinions. Nothing changes for them, but they have to tell each of their clients that the same broker is being paid. So they actually have to have this conversation when they're going through the offer because they actually have to fill in how they are representing this particular individual. Now, the conversation that's far more difficult, and it consumes several shows that we do across the year, and certainly not going to do it today, is when Brent brings one of his buyer clients to his seller's listing. This is what we call an intermediary without appointments. And in this situation, neither of the parties gets his advice and opinions anymore. This is a conversation we have to do prior to the offer, because we have to tell our buyer there is a small possibility that this might happen. So when we're drafting the offer, now, if we've done our job, we would have already discussed this in the buyer's rep. Buyer's rep, this comes up as well. So this should not be the first time they're hearing this. This is a constant reminder. In fact, there are 4 reminders that someone is going into an intermediary. Okay. So I always like to talk a little bit about that. We talk about this show being live in current events. So there are several things that we've talked about that have happened in the last hour. Here's another one where it starts talking about, has the seller's disclosure been sent? So one of our agents just a little while ago checked that they're going to receive it, but in 2 days. That is an option on the contract. So we pointed out to him, I'm like, well, I don't know why you want to wait 2 days when it's already there. There might be some, most sellers have already completed the seller's disclosure. For the general public who's watching, that document's already there. So why wait for it? If it's there, we want to see it before we draft this offer. We might find something on that seller's disclosure that would keep our buyer from purchasing this property. So to our agent that was just doing that, if you're watching, let me give you the longer explanation about this. If you had done it the way you had it, you would have gone under contract. You would have to put up option money, $100 to $200. That's not refundable. You would have got the seller's disclosure 2 days later, like you asked for, and you would have found there was foundation work, and you happen to have a buyer that doesn't want to deal with that. So they back out. You just cost that buyer $200 for something you could have known before had you looked at the seller's disclosure.
I would have paid for the inspection too at that point.
Yeah, we want to do this before. Now, the reason why that's on there are times when we're in such a hot market, we don't have a choice. We actually have to react quickly. And this is the time where we are gambling and saying, well, we can't wait for the seller's disclosure. We have to put the offer in place now. That's why that option exists. But to use it just at random, you don't want to do that. When you're prepping an offer, you want to have seen that seller's disclosure. You want to choose 7, option number 1, that you've already received it and it's been reviewed. So when we're prepping the offer, that's the route we want to take there.
Yeah, I should get. Shoot. There was actually one time a client said, a client told me, I want this offer in right now. I was like, okay, then.
That's exactly what we're talking about. We have no choice. We have to do what they tell us to do. Bam. We just jump into it and we get moving with it. That's exactly right. Sometimes we do not have the choice. All right, I'm going to talk about 1 or 2 more topics. I'm going to end the show a little bit early because I've got several events lined up back to back today, and I need a little bit of a time frame to switch to them. So I'm going to cut the show off here in just a couple of minutes. But let's see, one more quick thing as we're getting through the offer process and we're prepping for it. You also need to be advised if this is going to be a remote close, which means that either the buyer or the seller is not going to be in town the day of close. If that's the case, this is what we call a FedEx close, meaning the buyer or seller doesn't have to be there, but it means the title company is actually going to have to send documents to them so they can sign it and then send it back. This can cause a timing delay if it's not communicated early enough. So
a lot more common now too with COVID.
Absolutely. Very common. In fact, you might find that the only way we do it moving forward. Yep. It still amazes me. This is a great COVID conversation as well. I'm shocked that they're still sending notaries out to sign. I really thought COVID would break the mold, that they would stop this physical signature. They still are doing it. You're talking about, you want to talk about a modern day dinosaur, is the fact that we still physically sign at close. Take it right now. You can mark this on the show. That is going to disappear in the next year or 2. They are going to get it where you can do this all remote and you don't have to be anywhere. That's actually a good way to end the show. We started off with COVID and we're going to end with COVID, with possible consequences of COVID. I really think that is going to be an after effect that we are finally going to get rid of the manual signatures, because that is what's happening in COVID right now. Some of the title companies are adjusting to that. Y'all, I want to thank everybody for watching the show. Again, we continue to get increased viewership. It's always amazing to me that 500 to 600 people a week are actually browsing through and watching the show. And even though that's 500 or 600, just sometimes it's just looks, there are at least a third to a half of people that are physically watching that show. So that continues to show that we give very good value. We do appreciate everybody out there. We always continue to tell you to pass the show on to somebody else. You don't have to watch it at 12 to 1 on Thursday. You can watch it on archive. I want to thank both my guests. As always, I'm going to get my guy over there, Brent Holdburg. He's a big piece. He doesn't need to be thanked, but I thank him anyways for being on there. And Jessi, for sure, for being on the show. Jessi did a really good job, man. Really glad to have you. I'm glad we are starting that process with you. You deserve to be on the show. I want to start bringing you guys more often. So thanks for coming on, buddy. I really appreciate it.
Good job, Jessi.
Thank you,
great job. Guys, thanks for everything. We'll see you next week. Have a good one.